Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour and I am a member of the St. Lawrence County branch of the American Association of University Women, one of the sponsors of these programs. Today we are hosting a conversation with Mary Jones, the Director of Family and Support Services at Hospice and Palliative Care of the St. Lawrence Valley. Joining her is Bess Kearney, an educator and a retired superintendent of schools. Welcome. Bess, would you get us started?
Donna, thank you so much. Mary, thank you for being here.
Glad to be here.
We are about to talk about a subject that is often left in silence, that people would rather not talk about, and that is suicide. And you are here today to start the conversation. And I thank you for that. It's not easy. I think most of us understand the role of hospice and palliative care in terms of supporting families with a loved one who is dying. But could you explain the connection between hospice and suicide awareness and what you're doing about it?
Well, actually, hospice, one of our core values is promoting healthy grieving, effective grieving with our patients and their families, but also out in the community. It's part of our mission to provide that grief support. So we have a number of programs for anybody out in the community grieving a loss. We have support groups for parents whose children have died. We have programs for widows and widowers. We do grief of suicide support groups, and we have general grief information. We also provide grief counseling in the terms of psychoeducational, really helping them to understand the process. And anybody can come in and get that grief counseling, and that's what we provide. So that's kind of our community component. And when you look at suicide postvention, the grief work that's done afterward is suicide prevention. There's growing research that really supports really helping the survivors cope with the loss, help them to understand what they can expect to experience in that loss, and that really can be a very preventative format to use.
Well, first of all, is grieving after a suicide, is that different than?
I think the grief of suicide and the death of a child are probably the two most challenging. That's not to minimize anybody's loss in any way, but it comes with extra added features. And I think the complications, the complexities of suicide really makes it very challenging to grieve that loss, as it does of the death of a child. There's a lot of complexities to that. So it's very, very challenging.
So tell me a little bit about the Suicide Awareness Coalition. This has been in existence for
a number of years. And in fact, we were talking, and we're not quite sure when it started. It was a group of service providers, for the lack of a better word, that came together to really look at what are the issues about suicide. We've had some peaks and valleys in suicide here in St. Lawrence County, and it's really addressing what is it that we need to do. While we recognize that you can't 100% eradicate suicide, you can do a lot of things to prevent that, to get people to the right resources, to the right people that can help them manage the feelings that they have. And we've done a lot of work with that, and it's about training the community. It's about engaging the community, and as you said, a conversation that people really don't want to talk about.
Yeah. I'm aware that a few years ago, the Suicide Awareness Coalition launched a multi-agency effort over a period of months with venues throughout the county to just raise the level of awareness, and it was well planned, and I think it's not an exaggeration to say nobody came.
Right.
Mary, what?
We're okay with it once we got over our grief about
Well,
it.
yeah. But what does the data tell us about suicide in the North Country?
That we're not above the national average. We're about even with that, and I think that with any loss, it's really somewhat cyclical in that you have to be ready to respond in that moment. And I think the coalition recognized the value of educating the community, and we did a lot of publicity about that. but it has to be at the right time. It's like buying life insurance. You know you need to have it, but you never really think about it until you actually need it. And I think people thought, wow, that's great that they're doing that, but I really don't need to attend that. I don't need to know anything more about it. And then there's also the fear that if you are a survivor, family member, will that identify me that my loved one died, and I might want to keep that very private, and does that open me to scrutiny? We're better at supporting survivors of suicide, but we still want to put the blame on the survivors. We want to understand a reason. And I think Gertrude Stein, it's my favorite quote from her, and it's so appropriate for this. She says, there is no answer. There's never been an answer. There never will be an answer. That's the answer. And I think with suicide, we want to understand why. And we're never going to understand that. We have to remember everyone's an individual, and there's lots and lots of factors that contribute to that. It's not one single factor, and you can't look at it head on and say, okay, I know exactly what it is. And you often hear people say, well, that was such a selfish thing to do, or I would never do that. Great for you, but you weren't that person, and you don't understand what it's like to be, to have those feelings of not wanting to live. So you can't say you know what they would feel. And we approach it from that very rational mind. And anybody who's making that decision to end their life, that's not coming from a rational place.
So if you haven't been there,
you have no idea, and you can't. I don't think it's fair to comment on that. I understand you have a high need to understand, but me as a survivor also has a high need to understand. And you questioning me why I didn't see the signs, why I didn't recognize that they were struggling with this, only adds to my guilt that I myself didn't recognize that. And it presents more challenges for the survivors. And it also puts them at risk. And there's a lot of evidence to say that if they don't get that support, if they don't get that counseling after a death like that they are at risk. Because grief is very overwhelming. It consumes every fiber of your being, and you need that support. And we want to understand, and I think survivors need to understand there is no answer that's going to be logical. People often say that leaving a note is going to give you all the answers. And all that's going to show is really what a bad place that they were in. Because it's the logic that they're using and to take their own life.
so what's in that note reflects a very dark world and not the rational world that you
Exactly.
want to explain. Talk to me about the survivor stigma. You seem to imply that can get in the way of somebody seeking help. Is that
Absolutely.
really?
I think that we are much better at it, but people have been killing themselves for thousands of years. And thankfully we're not in the dark ages where if a family member killed themselves, the whole family would be then killed because they didn't want that spreading. We've moved thankfully on from that. But I still think that, there must be something wrong with not just that individual but the whole family, and that's judgment that nobody should be putting out there. How do you support them? And I think everyone's trying to figure out, well, what is it that I can say or do? And maybe if I not ask them enough questions, they'll figure out what's going on. And really the beauty of doing grief work, and it's I think why I love it so much, is you are listening. And that's all people need to do is listen to somebody, what's going on. And if there's issues, if you're talking to that person who may be thinking about suicide, what is it that I'm going to refer them to? We don't have to have the answers, and we're not going to fix anybody. And that's, I think, what the Suicide Awareness Coalition is looking at, is how do we engage the community and having these conversations of listening and then referring them to the appropriate people that can help them, that speak that language, that understand and can help them in a way that we as Joe Citizen can't do. And I think people are saying, oh, I don't want to get involved at all because I'm afraid I might mess it up. But you can mess it up by not doing anything. How do we become good citizens of the community that we live in?
Okay, you put yourself in the role of a suicide survivor, and I'm a well-meaning friend.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I choose not to just walk away or ignore it. What's the worst thing I can say?
What's the worst thing? I've heard a lot of worse things.
Okay.
Why didn't you know? Why didn't you stop him? You know it's your fault that he died, she died. Why didn't you know that they were having financial problems? It's well-intentioned, and I get that. And nobody's out there deliberately setting out to say these things. It's just what they're thinking. We need to say, we're sorry for your loss. I will remember your mom for being that remarkable woman that always had a great smile. That's what's going to help me as a suicide survivor. That's comforting. I think the survivors of suicide worry that their loved one would be remembered not for how they lived, but for how they died. And what a sad thing it is to always be remembered for how you died and not how you lived. And people have great lives. Everyone is susceptible to this. We need to be better at mental wellness. And we see that as such a stigma. Oh, they have a mental health issue. Well, that excuses all their behaviors. We need to be less afraid of that. We need to be more willing to engage. And we need to have those services that are going to help them. And when we start pulling away those services because of financial issues,
So what is available out there?
there's Reach Out, which is going to be on the screen with their number. They are, for me, the single point of entry, meaning that if you want information about information on suicide, on counselors, there's counselors out there. There's the mental health clinics through St. Lawrence County. There are resources that you can tap into. To get those resources. And it's even talking to somebody, this is what I'm seeing, what do you think, how do I get them that help? It works most of the time, but nobody can guarantee 100% of the time, but never give up, I guess that's what I would say.
And are there resources available through hospice?
The grief side of it is, we wouldn't want anybody calling us to say that somebody's suicidal, what do we do? We want you to call Reach Out. They're the ones that can get you the help the fastest, and they're the ones to talk to, and they can get you connected.
Excellent. If I just wanted to know more, to help myself, to help my family, we're not victims, thank God, but we're interested and want to become more aware. Is there some kind of a resource guide or a study guide available?
There is, and I know that we're going to put it up at our hospice website, and it's books that are actually available here in St. Lawrence County in the libraries. There's a number of websites that provide wonderful information about even having the conversations with your family. A lot of parents are always concerned, no, we don't want to have that conversation because it plants seeds that they're going to do that. And there's no evidence out there that suggests that talking about suicide is going to lead people to suicide. It's about understanding that you need to know that when you're having feelings that you really are feeling sad all the time, and I'm thinking of kids and teenagers, that you need to talk to somebody about that. And the parents need to be able to listen. And it's not anything that they have done wrong. It's that this is the child's mental wellness needs some additional support. And I think that it's a conversation that everybody should have, but it's not. And the resources that we have in the guide really lead parents to what is it that we say. And I get a lot of parents saying, so what do I say to my child about why they died of suicide? And I think they died of suicide is much more important to say than committed suicide. Committed suicide implies that it's a crime, and it was a crime at one time.
Right.
Which makes absolutely no sense that if you're dead, I don't know how they're going to charge you for doing that. They died of suicide. And it's a special illness that people have in their brains that causes them to do this. It's not everybody, but it's a special illness. And that's the way that you can talk to children and teenagers about that.
What are the groups that are most at risk?
I think there's a lot of publicity right now about teenagers dying from suicide caused by bullying. But in fact, although it is the third leading cause of death for 15 to 21-year-olds, it's more of the older population, the 65 and on up. And it's also men and women, predominantly men, in that 45 to 60 age range. It's the middle years. It's what have you done with your life? where are you going? And wow, this is not the way I thought it was going to be. It's not the Norman Rockwell or the Kardashian vision of what we think. You know, we're so easily influenced by media that this is the way our life should be, that sometimes when people take stock, it's not that way. And they're disappointed or they feel like they're a failure. And we're also in a society that success is everything. You know, when those groups didn't go, those education, okay, they didn't go. It's not a failure on our part. It's saying that didn't work, where do we go next? And I think you learn so much more from failures than you do from success. That I think that's the direction that you want to move in. And the older adults, they've lost their retirement savings in the stock market as they did a number of years ago. A variety of reasons, and they just don't feel that they can move forward. But the youth are not dying as quickly as these other age groups.
That surprises me.
Yeah.
So what signs should I look for to know that somebody might be at risk?
You're looking for changes in behavior. You're looking for them to be less engaged in their life. Maybe there's somebody that, wow, seems to be managing everything well, and now they're kind of pulling back from their activities. Perhaps they're decided to start giving things away. That's an indication. And it's not, and obviously with older adults, well, they're just downsizing, and that could be, mistaken for, well, they're just getting rid of their stuff. You're looking for just a real physical, emotional change in that person. And it's exploring with them. You don't seem to be yourself these days. What's going on?
And if you've noticed this over time, it's okay to say,
it's okay to say, wow, I'm worried about you. You don't seem to be doing so well these days. I'm a mom that always asked my kids when they were growing up about when they were struggling, and they were obviously very upset with whatever was going on in their life. So have you thought about wanting to end your life? And they would look at me in horror. Oh, come on, Mom, I'm not thinking that. And while some people are horrified that I would ask them that, I felt that was really important to, here's an opportunity. If you're feeling really down, let's talk about that. I think being fearful of that doesn't help anybody. And I'm not afraid to ask questions or answer questions, but not everybody's that way. And I think we, again, need to come back. Everyone's an individual, and you can't say this is what all people who have feelings of suicide are going to feel or respond. Everyone's an individual, and I think that's the biggest piece here, is that we want to say this is the cookie cutter that you need to look for. And there's lots and lots of risk factors, and there's lots of variables. To say it's one single thing that's causing them to feel depressed and it caused them to die of suicide is wrong. It's very, very complex. Very, very complex.
Well, I would be afraid, Mary. I would be afraid if I saw you all disheveled and just sort of dropping out of life. Well, not you, obviously, but I would be afraid to say to someone, is it bad enough that you've thought about ending your life? Because my innermost fear would be if they then did die of suicide, I'd feel guilty. I would feel that maybe I put that idea in their head.
There is a great movie out. It's called The Bridge. It's about the Golden Gate Bridge, and it's about how a lot of people jump from the bridge and die from suicide. And they interviewed one gentleman who survived the jump. And he said, leading up to it, he was standing on the bridge, he was crying, he was very, very upset. He was making that decision to end his life. And a tourist came up to him and said, can you take our picture? And he had been sobbing, he was very emotional. The tourist never said anything about, oh my gosh, are you okay? Just please take our picture, and then went on their way. That, I think, would have made a huge difference. When we can say to somebody, I'm worried about you, I'm concerned about you, it makes them pause and think, oh, so they really do care about me. Yeah. There's a great book, and it's on the resource list, Night Falls Fast, by Kay Redfield Jemison. And she is a therapist, and she's also somebody who's attempted suicide, I think 2 or 3 times. And in her book, she says there was no amount of love that she could receive or give that was going to change her decision to end her life. And I thought, wow, what a powerful thing to hear. She recognized that there was nothing anybody can do. This was her issue. Thankfully, she got help and went and saw the doctors and got the help that she needed. But I think we want to take on that it was our responsibility in some way if we said something to them. And I find it fascinating that when somebody dies of suicide, that we tend to blame everyone around them and not the person who completed that act. And I find that fascinating. We don't know what they were thinking, and we can blame everyone in the world. That doesn't change the fact that they're dead. What are we going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again? And that's why it's having these conversations. And yes, they're scary. And yes, I may ultimately end my life even if we've had that conversation, but at least you've had that conversation. I think it's interesting that people assume that the holiday time is when there's an increase in suicide, and actually it's one of the lower times because people are reaching out. And think about the media saying it's the time of year to connect with families, and you're sending Christmas cards, emails. People are reaching out to people that they only talk to once a year, and that helps buoy people saying, okay, I mean, I'm not saying it's not a dark time and it's not easy, but they have those connections. It's the spring, it's the renewal, and it's like, oh, I can't do this anymore. And you see the spike is in April.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was thinking back to the tourist on the bridge, and maybe she was being polite.
Yes.
And
His perception, though, was not even a stranger cares. So, again, it's having that perspective of that state of mind that he was in. And no, she would think, oh my gosh, she's really upset. I better not say anything to make him more upset, which is what you said. And in fact, he would have relished her saying something,
Right.
oh my gosh, are you okay?
so one of the messages, we have to pay attention. We have to pay attention.
We do. And we can't berate people. If people feel sad, oh, that's silly. You just need to suck it up and get over it. Everyone feels sad. Stop that. You can't stop that. It's like telling people that when their loved one has died, you just need to stop thinking about it. And what, that tells me that person has absolutely no clue as to what grief is about, because you're thinking about them 24/7, and you would welcome a break from that. Grief is very challenging, and dealing with mental health issues is really challenging. I was talking to a social worker yesterday, and she said that she was doing a group with schizophrenia, and she helped them to grieve the loss that they had this disease, and that they were working on it, but that they knew that they weren't going to be normal, and the loss that comes from that. Very, very powerful.
Wow. Talk to me about what's going on in our schools. I know that the data is it's not as high as, say, the middle-aged male.
Right.
But you were saying that it is the third
leading cause of death for 10 to 14-year-olds.
10. Oh my gosh.
Which I struggle with that. What 10-year-old is thinking that their life is so bad that they would want to end their lives? And I think we have to look at impulsivity. That kids can get really mad. I'll show them without thinking of the consequences. And there's kids with profound mental health issues that they need the help and support to deal with that. I think schools are so immensely challenged by all many different things. Obviously, I would love to see a lot more counselors in there, but it's a group effort, and the parents have to support that, the teachers have to support that, the school counselors have to support that. And I think that that's really hard, and you don't want another mandated program coming in, but it's really teaching children to be resilient. And for the most part, they are. They're incredibly resilient. But we've kind of moved away from coping tools. When we go into a school after there's been a death of a student, we focus a lot on grief education, and we focus a lot on
tools that they can use to be more resilient and navigating through all of this. And I think that when you focus solely on academics, you know, the recesses have kind of gone by the wayside for some schools. Some schools are bringing it back. Those are the coping mechanisms that children have. It's that energy, burning off that energy that allows them to go back into the classroom and be focused. And it's not sitting in front of the TV all the time playing video games. I think we need to go back to helping kids learn how to navigate through life. And we continue to operate under the assumption that life is fair and that everyone's going to be a winner. And that's not life. That's not life. And you want to be able to have the failures and the successes. Failures make successes that much sweeter, but you learn a lot more in failures than you do in a success. How are we teaching them to have those resilient qualities that are going to help them to navigate changes of all kinds? Because we live in a very rapidly changing world.
Yeah, I had read somewhere that the risk of suicide, or at least suicidal thoughts, was actually lower in schools that had gay, lesbian, transgender
Right.
alliances.
Right.
Can you speak to that a bit?
Again, it's acknowledging that the school is accepting of their lifestyle choices and that they're getting the support that they need. And I think that that's a critical piece to all of it, is that it's acknowledging that, yes, we accept you for who you are as an individual, and the lifestyle that you're choosing. And it's not even your choosing, I don't believe. I think it's something that they are inherently born with. We acknowledge that, and we want to help support you through that, because we don't live in a society that's very welcoming or supportive of that. I mean, we've just learned, you know, help them to have the rights to get married. How do we just support people to be who they are? Why does everyone have to be the same?
Well said. So tell me, who is involved in the Suicide Awareness Coalition? What agencies are involved?
It's an interesting array. We have representatives from Potsdam State, who's doing out of the dark walk, out of the darkness walk, and I'm trying to think of the date. I think it's on Saturday, April 4th or 11th. And that's an amazing process of college students getting all on board, raising money for Out of the Darkness Walk, and they walk down Pierpont Avenue over to the park, Ives Park, and there's some speakers there, and they raise money to fund the research so that we can understand more about suicide and what it is that we need to be mindful of, how do we have more preventative measures in place, and how do we support them. So they're involved. SUNY Canton is involved. There is Reach Out, who's very instrumental in this. Public Health, we have representatives from Public Health, Communities That Care through Seaway Valley Prevention, the Community Services Department over at St. Lawrence County. We've had some of the coroners. Jamie St. Cavage has been involved as almost as a first responder. He's, you know, the coroner is being called out, and he sees a need. How do we have these conversations to inform people? And hospice.
And hospice.
Yeah.
This is an enormous group effort. So
It is.
how would you define success? If you were successful beyond your wildest dreams with your suicide awareness and prevention efforts, what would it look like?
It would, that communities would have, there's a number of trainings that are out there. There's QPR, that's question, persuade, and refer. And that's really for the people out there, the neighbors, who may see somebody who's in distress. It could be the Meals on Wheels people that are dropping off that, you know, their lunch and dinner. What do they see? What questions can they ask? How can they persuade them to get some help? And then who do they refer them to? They're not fixing them. They're not therapists in any way, but they're understanding how to ask those questions that we're all fearful about. And those could be, you know, anybody out in the community. And then there's assist training, and assist training is, let me get my cheat sheet. because all I ever call it is ASSIST, is Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training, which Karen Easter and Hollis Easter are trainers for that. And that's a 2-day program. And that's more for the professionals out in the community, the clergy, the social workers, the people in the hospital, counselors. Here's some training on how it is that you can support somebody who is having thoughts of suicide. How do you get them to the right resources? And that's one of the things that the coalition is focusing on in 2014, is providing those ASSIST trainings.
And Karen and Hollis Easter are with Reach Out,
Reach Out,
which
yes.
is the number,
Amazing.
the number to call
Yes,
for help.
absolutely.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Absolutely.
So is there any parting message?
I think that obviously my hope for this, and I think the hope for the Suicide Awareness Coalition, is how do we engage the community? And people are sitting out there thinking, there's nothing I can do. And sometimes it's just giving a person a smile. And I know you're having a hard day, but so are they. How do we engage the community to take care of everyone? It takes a village to raise children. It takes a community to have a healthy community. And when you have healthy participants in your communities will thrive. And mental health is not something that should be stigmatized. Should be something that we all are on the bandwagon to support and make sure the services are necessary and needed.
Mary, thank you. Thank you for getting us started. Let's continue the conversation.
Absolutely,
This has
thank
been
you.
a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much to both Mary and Bess for this. This is such an important topic. Spend the time that we have on this. Unfortunately, our time is up. Thank you. These conversations are a production of North Country Matters, which is produced here in the studios of WCKN on the Clarkson campus. It's a civic collaboration between the St. Lawrence County branch of the American Association of University Women, the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, and the Communications and Media Department here at Clarkson. Until next time, please remember, our North Country matters. Thank you.